Welcome to The Debate. Imagine this scenario for a second. You are dying of thirst in just an endless, empty sea of sand.
Right. A complete nightmare.
Exactly. And then, suddenly, you see a shimmering oasis in the distance. The real question is, would your hope save you in that moment, or would it actually kill you?
Wow. Yeah, that is the question, isn't it?
It is. Because, when we think about humans facing nature, we usually picture someone climbing a massive mountain.
Mm-hmm.
You push against gravity, you plant a flag at the peak, and you conquer it. It's a very active, very forceful image. But the desert isn't a mountain.
No, not at all. It's a completely different kind of test. I mean, the desert strips away everything you think you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't care how strong you are. It's a landscape of pure, unforgiving survival.
And that brings us to the really fascinating material we are exploring today. We're looking at a brilliant philosophical survival guide, but it's disguised as an ancient journey.
Right. It's a YouTube video called How to Cross Desert Ancient.
Yes, the entire concept and the design by the creator, Hut, it takes us through 5 profound lessons from the dunes, and it mixes them with these dark, ancient desert legends.
Mm-hmm.
The creator uses the journey of an Arab wanderer crossing these endless sands as a metaphor. It's really about how we navigate the absolute hardest, most isolating parts of our own lives.
The imagery is stunning. I'll give it that. But how we interpret that journey is where we find ourselves deeply divided today.
Definitely.
Because when I look at this guide, I don't see a cheerful story about overcoming the odds. I argue that this text is actually a harsh, radical warning.
A warning.
Yes, it's telling us that human emotion, and especially our hope and our perception, is actually our greatest enemy in an unforgiving environment. To survive the desert or, any massive crisis in life, you have to stop trusting your own mind.
And I think people are misreading this guide completely if they only see the darkness in it.
Really?
Yeah, I argue that the text is a powerful celebration of human resilience. Yes, the environment is brutal, but the text shows that our psychological endurance, our careful preparation, and our stubborn, relentless hope are our greatest tools for survival.
I just don't see how you get there from the text.
Well, it literally says at one point, the greatest power, believing you'll cross. The narrator follows this figure called the Camel Prince through the endless dunes. And when they are totally exhausted and ready to give up, they find the internal engine to take just one more step.
They do take that step, yes. But I come at it from a completely different way. You say the text celebrates hope. But the desert environment in this video fundamentally rejects normal human optimism.
How so?
Think about the very first lesson the traveler learns. Trusting your eyes by day is a trap. The material is obsessively focused on how our own brains deceive us when we are desperate.
You're talking about the Mirage, right?
Exactly. We've all heard of mirages, but the text really digs into the psychology of it. A shimmering oasis appears. The water sparkles. It tempts the traveler to run toward it.
Right, which is human nature.
Right, but the guide tells them to stop. Why? Because the brain is experiencing confirmation bias in an extreme environment. The body so desperately needs water that the mind literally paints a picture of salvation right over the baking sand.
They tricks you.
Yes, the text calls this mirage vivid hope to a dying traveler. They run toward it, it vanishes, and it leaves nothing but despair. So I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the text is celebrating hope. Let me tell you why.
Okay, go ahead.
Later in the video, during the section on those desert legends, it delivers this incredibly chilling line. It says, "Sometimes hope itself is the greatest monster. Survival requires stripping away human illusions, not clinging to them."
Okay, I'll admit, calling hope a monster is a chilling line. You're absolutely right about that.
Thank you.
But I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective on what the text is actually doing there. Isn't it drawing a very sharp, deliberate line between false hope and true hope?
False hope versus true hope. How so? I mean, hope is just a desire for a better outcome. In the desert, wanting a better outcome makes you chase a hallucination.
But let's look at the mechanism of what is happening. False hope, in this guide,
is entirely visual and external. It's the Mirage. It's an optical trick played by hot air bending the light, combined with your brain's desperation.
Right, it's an illusion.
Exactly. It's an illusion outside of yourself that you try to chase. But true hope, according to the text, is completely internal. The text defines true hope as stubborn persistence.
Stubborn persistence.
Yes. It's the quiet, internal choice to just say, I am going to take one more step. If you look at the final lesson, the narrator explicitly says, today I crossed another stretch because of it. Hope is the engine. I think you might be confusing an optical trick with true spiritual persistence.
Well, that's a compelling argument, but have you considered that the text intentionally blends the two? It doesn't say false hope is a monster, it says hope itself is.
I think that's a semantic stretch.
Not at all. And that's because the emotion of hope fundamentally requires you to ignore your immediate reality. When doubt whispers give up, your choice to take one more step requires you to reject the truth of your exhaustion.
But you have to reject it to survive.
And in the desert, rejecting reality gets you killed. Let's look at quicksand, which is one of the terrors mentioned in the Bedouin legends. Quicksand isn't just a metaphor. Literally, the physics of it means that the more you struggle and fight to get out, the tighter it grips you and the faster you sink.
Oh, sure.
Your active fight, which is driven by your hope to escape, is exactly what kills you. The environment demands that you stop fighting.
But stillness is just a temporary measure to avoid a specific trap. I mean, if you're listening to this and wondering how on earth doing nothing saves you, it's because my colleague here is focusing entirely on the noon sun and the quicksand.
They are central parts of the video.
They are, but what happens when the sun sets? The desert isn't just hot, it's a place of extremes. At night, the temperature plunges below freezing. Stillness will kill you then. You have to take action.
Well, the text does address the cold nights.
It does, and look at the active preparation it requires. The traveler doesn't just lie down and freeze. They dig into the sand, they half-bury their body to use the stored daytime heat as a blanket. Think about that for a second. The exact same heat that tries to kill you at noon is what you have to dig up and wrap yourself in at midnight.
It is a striking image.
That is honestly brilliant. And the text gives us the why behind it. It says, what you gather in good times saves you in bad. It explicitly compares this stored heat to kind words, habits, and small efforts.
So it's about building habits.
Exactly. It's like building a cognitive reserve or, putting money in a savings account for a rainy day. You bank good habits to survive trauma. That is a highly active, constructive, hopeful way of living.
The metaphor of gathering habits is beautiful, I'll grant you that. But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning.
Why not?
Because you're focusing on the physical action of digging rather than the philosophy of submission that actually governs the entire piece. Look at the very first rule of the guide. It says, pause, breathe, wait for truth to appear.
Right.
The text explicitly states, stopping isn't defeat, it's survival.
But again, you stop to assess the situation, not to quit completely.
No, stopping is the fundamental posture you must take toward the universe. When high noon hits and the heat is literally like flames, the text says to seek the shade of a black goat hair tent and rest. Rest is strength, not surrender.
Sure, you rest.
You survive by submitting your ego to the desert's rules. You have to realize how small you are. You cannot outwalk the noon sun. You cannot outrun the mirage.
Well, obviously.
But active conquest, which is our normal human default, the whole climbing the mountain idea we started with, that gets you killed out there. The desert demands submission and radical skepticism. You have to constantly doubt your own urge to keep moving.
I agree, you cannot outwalk the sun. Ego will certainly get you killed. But finding your way in the dark requires intense, forward-looking action. I want to introduce an analogy here to explain how I see the traveler's actions.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of the desert traveler like a sailor navigating a pitch-black ocean. A sailor on the open water doesn't just float and submit to the chaotic waves. They actively read the sky.
True.
The desert is a fluid, shifting ocean of sand. You can't trust the ground, so what do?
You look up. The text does mention the night sky becoming a map.
Right. The narrator places Polaris, the North Star, at their back and tracks the Big Dipper. The stars are loyal. They never shift. Finding your unchanging stars is a highly active process.
Okay.
You have to look up, identify them, align your body, and walk. When the ground beneath you is completely untrustworthy, looking up is an act of trust and hope. The text says these stars light the darkest paths. That is not submission. That is active navigation using a hopeful, unchanging guide.
I love the sailor analogy, but let's follow it all the way through. Why does a sailor rely on the stars?
Because they tell you where to go.
Precisely, because the ocean around them is chaotic, deadly, and entirely indifferent to their survival. The text praises the stars because they are not human. It says, friends may fade, but these lights guide forever.
Exactly.
But think about what that means. The traveler has to rely on cold, distant, non-human balls of burning gas millions of miles away because human perception down on the sand is deeply flawed. The stars are unchanging, but the sand is constantly shifting.
Which is exactly why the human mind has to adapt and create structures to deal with that shifting sand. And that brings us to what I think is the most fascinating part of Hadout Hach's design.
The mythology.
Yes, the mythology. The video doesn't just give practical advice, it dives deeply into ancient Bedouin superstitions, haunted wells after dark, jinns' chariots, ghouls, camels that seek revenge.
Right, the darkest legends of the dunes. And I think this is where the text warning is the loudest.
See, I disagree entirely. I argue these stories are actually brilliant societal safety mechanisms. The text says these tales remind us to respect the desert, honor its mysteries.
A warning.
But more than that, when you are dealing with a landscape that can swallow an entire caravan alive in a matter of minutes, you need stories to safely frame the unknown. Let's define what a jinn's chariot actually is in this context.
It's a sandstorm.
Exactly. It's not magic. It's a terrifying, towering wall of red dust and wind, a massive sandstorm. Why would an ancient person call it a chariot? Because giving a name to the storm, giving it a face, is a way for the human mind to process extreme, uncontrollable danger without just breaking down in panic.
Interesting.
It's a psychological survival tool. Saying don't go to the haunted well is just a story-driven way of saying don't wander off in the dark and fall in.
I mean, that is a very comforting anthropological way to look at monsters. But I completely disagree with that reading.
You don't think they're practical?
I don't think the text presents these legends as helpful protective tools. No. I think it presents them as evidence of how the desert breaks the human mind.
Breaks the mind? How does a ghost story break the mind?
Look at the exact phrasing in the conclusion of that section. The text says these beasts are nature's fury mixed with human fear. The real terror out there isn't a supernatural ghoul. The real terror is the combination of a totally indifferent environment and our own terrified, hallucinating minds.
I wouldn't call a sandstorm a hallucination.
No, but the final overarching lesson of the video is incredibly stark. It says the desert never lies.
Meaning the sand simply is what it is?
Exactly. The sandstorm is just wind and dirt. The mirage is just bent light and heat. The desert never lies, which heavily implies that humans are the ones doing the lying.
Lying to themselves, you mean?
Yes. Our fears, our illusions, our hopes, our stories about revenge-seeking camels, those are the lies. And those lies are the real danger. The text is telling us that human fear creates monsters out of thin air. We project our internal chaos onto an empty landscape.
I see why you emphasize that point. The environment is brutally honest, and sure, if you step in quicksand, you sink. But I would argue that even if human fear mixes with nature's fury, the act of passing these stories down from generation to generation is a profound act of care. It keeps people safe.
It keeps them safe by using fear to counter their dangerous ignorance. It is still a system based entirely on realizing how weak and easily fooled we are.
Well, we are fragile out there.
Right. Whether it's a mirage pulling you toward fake water or a ghost story keeping you away from a dry well, the common denominator is that our direct human perception simply cannot be trusted.
I understand your focus on human weakness here. The mind is fallible. But let's pull back and look at the bigger picture of the text.
Okay.
Let's look at how the traveler actually survives the whole journey.
Yes, they have to deal with mirages and wait out the noon sun. Yes, they have to navigate the terrors of the night. But they do cross the desert. They do survive. And they do it by holding on to what the text explicitly calls the unbreakable.
The unbreakable hope.
Yes, the unbreakable, the hope that we will make it across. You cannot simply ignore that line. The creator, Hatat, specifically designed this text to end on a note of triumph.
Triumph is a strong word.
The narrator says, your path has an end too, keep walking. It's a direct address to us, the listener. It's meant to inspire. If the core message was only radical skepticism and that hope is a monster, it wouldn't tell the listener to keep walking. It would just say trust nothing and lay down.
It tells the listener to keep walking, yes, but only after they have stripped away all their false assumptions. Let's be really clear about how they survived.
They use their tools and habits?
They only survived the freezing night because they gathered the heat of the past and buried themselves in the sand. They only survived the day because they stopped running toward the fake water. They only survived the heat because they surrendered to the shade.
Right, practical steps.
The survival is real, but the method is deeply radically skeptical. You only get to keep walking if you first learn how to stop.
Wow. You only get to keep walking if you first learn how to stop. That is a beautifully profound way to summarize the tension in this material.
Thank you.
We have covered a lot of ground today, from the psychology of mirages to the physics of quicksand and the ancient stories we tell to keep the dark at bay. As we bring this discussion to a close, let's make sure we clearly summarize our positions for our listeners, keeping it as simple as the lessons themselves.
I think that's a great idea.
To summarize my view, I believe this video designed by Hot is a beautiful, deeply human guide to surviving the hardest parts of life. It teaches us to gather warmth from the good times, just like burying yourself in sand that holds the sun's heat. Illusion you chase? It is stubborn, internal persistence. It's the quiet choice to take one more step when everything else tells you to give up.
And to summarize my view, I believe the video is a profound and necessary warning. The desert shows us that our immediate senses cannot be trusted. The mirage proves that our own deep desires will trick us into chasing fake water.
Right.
We have to learn to pause, breathe, and wait for the truth to appear. We must realize that our own minds, our hopes, and our fears can be just as deadly as the freezing sand or a massive sandstorm. Survival means letting go of what we want to see, submitting to the reality of our environment, and accepting the indifferent truth of the desert.
What makes this source material so brilliant, and why we could debate it for hours, is how it holds both of these truths at exactly the same time. The desert is a mirror that reflects our deepest fears and illusions.
Yes, and it is also the stage where our persistence is ultimately tested. The traveler has to balance extreme caution with the willpower to actually move forward.
It's an incredibly delicate balance. You have to completely doubt the oasis you see right in front of you, but completely trust the stars shining millions of miles above you.
Exactly. You must know exactly when to stop and bury yourself in the sand, and when to stand up, align yourself with the sky, and follow the camel prints into the dunes.
There is so much more to uncover in this material. The layers of meaning in just these 5 short lessons are incredible. It really makes you think about how you navigate your own harsh landscapes, whatever they might be.
It certainly does. It forces you to question what you are running toward in your own life, and whether it's real water or just bent light and your own desperate desire.
We want to leave you, our listeners, with something to think about today. As you face your own deserts, your own stretches of endless sand, ask yourself, what are the unchanging stars that guide you when the path disappears?
And just as importantly, are you brave enough to stop and wait for the truth when the mirage appears?
Thank you for joining us as we explored how to cross Desert Ancient. Keep seeking your shade and keep searching the sky.